You're listening to episode 168, Olivier's Story, a film inspired by a son with Down syndrome. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy that you're here today. Please excuse the questions that I ask at the beginning of this interview as it relates to New York City, because it's not every day that I get to interview a big filmmaker from the city. Well, they live in Jersey now, but you know, it's all relative and it's all magical and wonderful. And for those of you who didn't know, I was supposed to be on Broadway. I know, growing up and have my career there and be famous and a dancer and all that stuff. Didn't work out that way. So I'm here hosting a podcast with all of you, which is actually exactly where I'm supposed to be. Okay. Anyway, enough about me. This is such a beautiful interview with this dad. His name is Olivier. His son, Emilio, was diagnosed with Down syndrome on the day that he was born. So he walks us through kind of what that beginning jolt into parenthood looked like, and which inspired him to create this really special film that follows families and talks deeply about inclusion and how it can happen and what families experience. So the film is called Forget Me Not, and he tells us all where you can find it, but spoiler alert, it's free on Tubi. You can find it on Amazon and download it there. He says he has CDs if you need it. So let's get it in the hands of people who need to hear it. That means parents, teachers, medical professionals, so many people. And I just really want to thank Olivier for being here with us today. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners. Well, Olivier, I'd like for you to just kind of start off introducing us to your family, telling us about where you live, and a little bit just about you.
Sure. We live in Montclair, New Jersey. I have a wonderful son who's about to be 7. He was born with Down syndrome. And we have a daughter, Camilla, who's 18 months. My son's name is Emilio. I'm not sure if I mentioned it. And my wife, Hilda. So it's 4 of us now. And we recently transitioned from Brooklyn, New York, and now we're in New Jersey.
Okay, so is this like going from the burbs to the even more burbs, or what kind of caused you guys? I thought once you were in Brooklyn, you're in Brooklyn for life. Is that not how it works anymore?
Yeah. Well, we loved Brooklyn. I was there for about 10 years with Hilda, and Emilio was born there, and we had a great time. And then once we hit school age, that's kind of when we encountered some problems with Emilio being included in school. And the pandemic happened, and we had another child on the way, and we're like, the apartment living is not quite working for us anymore. Let's see what else is out there. So.
Do you both work in New York? Do you say, is that why you're staying closer, or what works well for your family?
Yeah, so I work in New York City. Ilda is staying at home to care for Emilio and her daughter. And yeah, it's we both love New York. Ilda, my wife, is from Puerto Rico and she met me in New York and she fell in love with New York and I moved to New York around the same time and fell in love with it. So we just want to be close to it. We can still see the skyline from the tippy top of our house.
Yeah.
So it makes us feel connected to just the life and culture there.
Amazing. Yeah. I think New York changes you no matter how long you spend there or not. So I always love hearing about those stories, especially being down here in Austin. It's just such a different world and one that I so long to go as much as I can. But well, walk us through. First of all, I the amount of dads I've had on this podcast this year is amazing. I think you're number
Go
five or
dads.
six. Go dads. Absolutely. I think the first few years was mostly all moms. So the more dad representation and just this really kind of acceptance and ability to share is amazing. So I'm grateful that you're here. Talk to us a little bit kind of about finding out at the beginning about Emilio's diagnosis and what that day was like for you guys.
Sure. Well, I'm a filmmaker, so it's just a natural position for me to have a camera in my hand, I guess. And
Mm,
I'd filmed my wife's pregnancy and a lot of our moments in our relationship, and the birth was no different. I was the stereotypical dad with a camera in his hand.
mm,
Only when Emilio was born, it was pretty dramatic. There was a lot of NICU doctors that rushed in. There was certain complications. And a few minutes later, I thought I had stopped recording and I was still recording when the doctor came and told us that he showed 5 markers of Down syndrome. And to that point, I had no idea what Down syndrome was. I knew what it was, but I really didn't know what it was.
mm,
I had a lot of misconceptions in my head, and it was a very gloomy moment that we weren't ready for. And largely that's because as a child, I hadn't been around children with disabilities much. They were kind of hidden from us, and I had no experience. And what should have been one of the best moments of our life became one of the scariest because we didn't know what we were facing. And that kind of led me on the journey to create the film that we're here to talk about, Forget Me Not, um, which is really about Emilio and trying to get him included.
mm. It's an interesting and a repetitive story that I hear and experienced myself that when we were younger, it's true. Kids who were different than us tend to stay away. And if anything, I think I felt maybe curious, but a little afraid. Like, why are they being kept away? And is there going to be harm done to me? And I don't understand this. And I'm a young child. And is this contagious? Just all those misconceptions that you miss with. So thank you for sharing that because I felt that myself too. Um, so talk to us about like you using your skills, like your gifts and how you've incorporated them into your family. I think that's so beautiful that you've been able to capture some of these moments. But I'm sure, like you said during the actual birth, they're not all wonderful moments that you anticipate. Some are more harder moments. So talk to us kind of about the acceptance phase and how you integrated your filmmaking with that.
Yeah, so you know, I think originally we were just so floored and overtaken by the moment, but that quickly gave way to us just recalibrating and trying to understand what can we do for our son. How can we this child that's new to us with Down syndrome that we know nothing about, what can we do to make the best world for him? And when my wife and I spoke to each other, the discussion always came around, well, we want the same thing for Emilio that we wanted for the child that we thought we were having, which is him to have all the opportunities in the world, and him being able to achieve whatever he wants to achieve. And that quickly turned into a conversation about him being included. And we didn't want him to be hidden from other children. We wanted him to do all the same things that we would do with any other child. And so inclusion kind of became our mission. And on that mission, I had a lot of learning to do myself. I had a lot of misconceptions to break. And as you said earlier, growing up, if you don't have experience being around children with disabilities, it's probably because you were taught that it's rude to ask questions. It's you shouldn't ask questions, and then we become shy, and there's suddenly a river between us. And I think what I wanted to do was to build a bridge into understanding what is it like to be with this, to live with disabilities, and how can we make the world a more accepting place of people with disabilities. So being a filmmaker, I decided to go on this journey of learning what inclusive education is and how it can change schooling in a way that I wish my schooling had been different,
Yeah.
which was that we could all learn with each other and from each other. So we went on this journey of making this film about inclusive education and speaking to experts and visiting some wonderful schools, namely the Henderson School up in Boston, where 40% of children have disabilities and 20% of the children have significant disabilities, like Emilio's. And they're all in the same class. There's not a single special ed class. And it was just such an amazing thing. And as we're making that film, we realized that Emilio was suddenly being pushed into a more segregated setting for preschool. So we started to turn the cameras on ourselves and make the film a little more personal. And
Mm.
that's how we ended up with the film we have today.
Mm. What did you see when you went to the Henderson School? And how was it different than what your son was being pushed to do?
Well, the first moment I walked into the Henderson School, my eyes were just wide open. I'd never seen a place like that. It just seemed like the holy grail of what you want schooling to be. There was children in wheelchairs, children that were deaf, children that were blind, and they were all hanging out and playing with each other and talking to each other. And the older kids were eating lunch together. And it was just from the very moment you walk in, just an atmosphere of acceptance. And you very quickly realize that, wow, this is like a mirror of what society should be. This is a
100%.
place where everybody is getting along and they don't see they see differences, but it doesn't hamper anything. It doesn't
Right.
stop them from interacting.
Mm.
And the moment I saw that, I had my mind set. I'm like, this Emilio needs to be going to a place like this. This is where he's going to thrive and help him come out of his shell a little bit.
Yeah.
And you know what happened when we went to the first IEP meeting in New York, my wife and I were all excited about inclusion. And the first thing they said is Emilio scored poorly on his evaluation exams, and that he had never been in a classroom before, so he probably wouldn't succeed in a larger classroom. And then they showed me a chart, which was a bell curve, and Emilio didn't fit on the curve. Like, he was off the page, like out of a movie.
Wow.
And we just quickly realized that this wasn't going to be a collaborative IEP session, and that we should maybe
Yeah.
reconvene and come back with an advocate to help us.
Wow. Do you think you've always had the voice of an advocate, whether it was for yourself or your family, um, maybe for some of the other films you've done before? How naturally did you step in? Because I know when, you're first in a setting, especially your first IEP meeting, your first doctor visit, like you don't even know that you can ask for things that you can ask for. You're just kind of by nature intimidated by not being in this environment before. How long did it take you to step into that advocating role? I know sometimes when we're parents to it, we get a lot faster advocating for our kids than we do for ourselves. I don't know if you found that.
Absolutely. I wouldn't say I'm a natural born advocate. I think it really, like so many other things, Emilio's taught me so many things about myself. Um, but I've been raised to always question everything. So,
Mm,
just because things have been done a certain way in the past doesn't mean that they should be done that way. So I have that's just my nature, I guess. But
yeah.
as far as advocacy, I can't say that I've really spoken up. And that's something that I'm not proud of, because there's probably some times when I should have and I haven't. But Emilio kind of taught me that, the world's not made for everybody, and that, especially in my position, if I can use what I do to make the world just a little bit better, just put a little dent in the world for everybody else, then I should be doing that.
Mm. So beyond the educators and the institutions and, um, the other things you were learning in this film, what kind of other families did you meet? And was that connection meeting other families who have forged similar paths? What does that mean to you?
Well, largely, as I was saying, the film wasn't really supposed to be so personal. And the idea was that we were going to follow a few families around for a while and just kind of visit their journeys throughout the film. But you know, we got to meet some really interesting people that are going through some really challenging moments and have had some really great successes and some great failures. There's one student, Aiden, who at the time of filming was about 14, I want to say, and his dad had been essentially in a lawsuit with the district for years because they were trying to bus him 1 hour in each direction to go to school to get his services, and they wouldn't allow him to go to his local public school where his brother and sister were going because he had Down syndrome. And to hear a story like that, just the stress that puts on the family and what they've had to go through was awful. And they're still fighting that battle. They're still going through that lawsuit, and the only person that loses is Aiden because the whole time he's been homeschooled. So it's when you look at stories like that, they're a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah,
They say, oh well, parents have recourse, they can go to court and they can do these things, but the
that's
truth
not
is that
easy.
it's not easy. It takes time, it takes money, and the child loses. You don't
Right.
get those years back.
Mm.
But then we had some really great successful stories. There was a story of Wesley in Brooklyn who had uh, had been removed from an inclusive setting, and we started filming with them right when he was put back into an inclusive school in New York City. So um, filming that story just gave me hope, and it gave
Mm.
me reason to believe that we could accomplish the same thing. And I hope when parents see our film, they feel the same way, that, it's possible, and that they can do it themselves.
Mm. Oh my goodness. It's emotional, to think about the impact that you and these families who agreed to be in the film will have for so many people. And storytelling is, such a gift. So I'm so grateful that you have, shared yours and made it so personal. Um, what do you think you've learned about yourself, since becoming Emilio's dad? What I guess what I'm trying to ask is not exactly what he's taught you, and I'm sure he has taught you a lot of things, but is there something inside of you that feels different? Um, I've had parents answer this question like, yes, I'm different. I didn't know how strong or what I was. And then somebody say, yes, I didn't know how scared I was, and every emotion in between. What have you learned about yourself?
Yeah, all the in between.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if you can ever really truly be ready to be a parent just because you don't know what's going to happen. But
Mhm.
what I did learn is that up to that point, my entire life, I had some kind of control over it, and I was able to manipulate it in a way that went in the direction I wanted it to go. And when Emilio was born, it just changed my whole perspective on that. You can't predict things, and it really allowed me to live in the moment for the first time in my life, I think, where
Oh.
there's all these things going on with Emilio and what will the future look like and all the thought creeping. But really, this moment's going to pass. Emilio's going to be 7 next year. He's going to be 8 next year. I should sit down and enjoy this very moment with
Mm.
him and just make it the best I possibly can. So, um, he's definitely changed my perspective on what time is and how I should best use it, I think.
Mm. And going back to inclusion a little bit, for you, what have you learned? And what is the world you design for Emilio right now? And let's do it from what we went through as kids all the way up to the Henderson School. Where do you see him in a realistic way that maybe other parents who are listening can find ways to advocate, and then those who are listening who don't have a child with special or medical or complex needs can start opening up their own kids' eyes too?
Yeah, well, I think the first part of that is that anybody could have a disability at any moment. And what we need to do and work together is to create a world that can support all types of people. So I think that's the first thing. There's so much there. When I went to school, we were taught in a way that was to the average student. So what is the average student? Well, the truth is there is no average student. Nobody
True.
fits this mold of the average student.
Yeah.
And yet we were taught that way with a teacher in front of a blackboard that, hoped we would get the lesson ingrained in our brains long enough to take a test and pass.
Yeah.
It didn't work so well for many students, including me.
No. Yeah.
So when I look at inclusion, really what it is they practice something called universal design for learning, for example, where much like universal design for architecture, you're creating a system that can support all types of mobility. So a wheelchair ramp allows people to access a doorway in a wheelchair, but it also is really convenient for a UPS delivery guy who has to roll a cart up to deliver boxes. And it's even more convenient for people that are walking because it's easier than stairs. What you're doing when you create a universal design is that you're creating a wheelchair ramp for everybody. What that looks like is teaching in multiple ways at the same time for the same lesson. So very simple example, because I'm not a teacher, I can't speak extensively to it, but a very simple example is math. Some people might learn very well from a teacher on a whiteboard, but some people might need colored blocks to help learn addition. So they're doing that at the same time in a group. And some people might be more auditory and learning a different way. So I think the idea that we need to teach a lesson plan to the average student has to go away, and we need to instead teach to the margins. Because what you also find in a successful inclusive classroom is that the children that excel end up reinforcing the lesson by helping students that need more help, that might be intellectually challenged or have other difficulties. And what you're also teaching at the same time is something even more important, which I think is empathy. And that's something that can't be taught through a textbook. You can't teach empathy. It has to be in practice. And, Emilio today is in an inclusive classroom, and he's going to school with children that he's going to go to high school with eventually. And eventually they're going to all go off to college and maybe come back to town and maybe own businesses in town, and they're going to know Emilio, and they're going to look out for him because they're buddies. So, I think the idea of inclusive education, one is the academics, but two is the social impact is huge.
Mm. I love that picture, right? And I think what you're saying is from the very beginning, when you guys were selecting what school he was going to be in, you were really also choosing a community, and a community that you were going to set your roots down in and start to make an impact. So who is this documentary for? Who do you hope that it reaches?
The most obvious audience for the film, I guess, is parents of children with disabilities. But the truth is that I made the film for myself before I had Emilio. And, I knew nothing about disabilities. I never thought about education. So I made the film in a way that was easy to understand and easy to access, and really just a good story to watch. And I think that my hope is that parents of typically developing children will see it and think about the benefits for their children, because the way we can have more inclusive schools is for all parents to ask for it. So if a parent of a typically developing child asks for their child to be put in an inclusive class, that opens more opportunities for children with disabilities, for example. The other thing is, inclusive education in terms of benefiting all children, the what happens is that, they go into these classrooms and there are multiple ways of learning, but there are also multiple teachers in the class. So suddenly you have a class of 25. There's not just one teacher, there's aides, there's special education teachers, and it's actually a much better environment to learn. And a lot of the parents I speak to that have typically developing children in those classrooms, they say that's what attracted them.
Yeah.
um, is then more attention, more care. So, as far as the film goes, really I made the film to share, and it's actually available for free on Tubi now,
Wow.
just so that parents share it and ask their friends to watch it. And, like I said, I hope first and foremost that it's a good movie and engaging to watch. So,
Mm. I think there's no doubt about that. What you're reminding me of when you talk about like the different eyes in the classroom is when I worked in a NICU setting and the parents would be in this open bay concept. So it would look like a lot of babies with, curtains in between. And to somebody from the outside perspective, it's like, gosh, there's so many babies here. You don't have like any privacy. And then I had one parent say to me, I love this because the nurse 2 bays down is going to hear my baby's alarm beep. And the mom who walks by my kid might like give my kid like some good vibes or, like this idea of us just all being together, all having each other's backs. Very much reminds me of that inclusive classroom where you get multiple professionals, multiple people looking out for your kids. And it doesn't seem like there is a disadvantage at all to this world that is we're capable of. And so I think your movie is going to do an amazing job at sharing that, teaching empathy, and also being a really good story. So thank you for sharing it with us.
oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, where can people find it? You mentioned Tubi, but where are some other places they can either follow along with you or your family or just find the movie in general?
Sure. So the film has a website, forgetmenotdocumentary.com, and a shorter version is fmndoc.com.
Mm.
And we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the Instagrams. So that's Forget Me Not documentary on all those. And yeah, I think the film is available on Tubi. It's available for rental on Amazon. People can purchase DVDs if they still have DVD players. And soon it's going to be on iTunes and Vudu and all the other streaming services. So we're looking forward to that in the next couple of weeks.
I love that. So how do we get it into like all collegiate teacher programs or certificates and all medical students' hands? And, I think that's really the way that we start to make changes for those people who are in those higher positions. So if you're listening, please watch it, please share it. And please tell your family, Emilio, Hilda, and your daughter, thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Child Life On Call podcast. The only reason this podcast keeps on going is because of you and listeners like you. So please join in on the conversation with us on Instagram, Facebook. I'm even on TikTok now, y'all, making a fool of myself. I haven't danced yet, but maybe it's coming. You can find us at Child Life On Call. We also have a website, and that has all of our information about the Child Life Circle, about the Child Life On Call app, and a blog with new information all the time. That's childlifeoncall.com. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for listening to these episodes and being a part of this community. We are so grateful and so honored to be able to provide this for you.